Okay, so yesterday we started talking about biomes. Okay, we talked about how biomes are ecological regions on Earth. Okay, and that those are influenced, or their locations are influenced by things like climate factors, okay, latitude, altitude, okay, and things of that nature determine where we'll find these biomes, what the structure of those biomes is going to be, etc. And then we got into detail about the first biome, which was the tropical rainforest. Okay, so keeping in the vein of tropical climates, the next one is the savanna. Okay? The savanna is a tropical grassland. So you are only going to find it around equatorial areas. So most of Africa would be savanna. Okay, at least the part of it, sorry, central to southern Africa would be savanna, because obviously North Africa is all desert. So savanna biomes cover about 12% of the Earth's land area, and they often border on tropical rainforests. Okay, it's generally, like we say, a grassland biome, but there are often wooded areas, like kind of open woodland areas, kind of interspersed in between, in places where there could be springs or like supplies of water that might be more consistent. Okay, so you could have like almost like an oasis within the savanna in places. Okay. So you can see here in these pictures that it's definitely fairly, well, I mean, there can be mountainous terrain, but obviously there'd be different biomes kind of on the mountain tops, but it's mostly flat. Okay, and we see that there's lots of animals. Okay, and I mean, if we're looking at a tropical grassland, that would mean that there's a lot of food available. Okay, and so we're going to have much larger animals than we would have had in the tropical rainforest. Okay, and you can see again that there's patches of wooded areas, but all the trees generally have the same kind of flattened shape to them, and we'll talk about why that is in a bit. Okay, so the climate of the savanna is the reason why it is different than the tropical rainforest. While the savanna can receive as much precipitation as the tropical rainforest, it is not evenly dispersed. Okay, so the tropical rainforest gets about the same amount of rain all year long, and it's very consistent. But in the savanna, there is a monsoon season, and then there is a dry season. Okay, during the monsoon season, they can get rain measured in meters in a month. Okay, and then they'll get nothing for 4 months. It won't rain for 4 months. Okay, so obviously, if you're not going to grow a jungle if you're going through a 4-month-long drought. Okay, after torrential rainfall. Right? Everyone kind of follow me on that? So they have a very unique shape to their climatogram. They still have the flat temperature line, okay, of any tropical climate. Any equatorial climate doesn't have any seasons, but you can see, okay, we've got, in a month here, we're getting 350 millimeters of rain. The next month, 350 millimeters of rain. Okay, so within the course of 3 months, we're getting over a meter of rain. And so that's obviously huge. Right? So they get that rain, and then, like we say, it drops right off, and we're looking at less than 20 millimeters of rain, which is like this much in a month. Okay, so that would be their very, very dry season. So they experience the dry season, which causes lots of plants to estivate or go dormant. Okay, they go dormant just like our plants do, except for the opposite reason. It's going to be hot and dry, whereas ours go dormant because it's going to be cold and dry. Wildfires are a big deal. Okay, with this long dry season, it's possible that these huge amounts of grassland and stuff like that get really crispy. Okay, and if we get like a a thunderstorm, or where there's not really a lot of rain but dry lightning, okay, then obviously huge patches of the biome can get burned up. And because of that, some of the plants are fire resistant. Okay? A lot of the trees have very thick, porous bark that can actually insulate them against the heat of a fire. Okay? So while all their leaves may burn off, the tree isn't killed. Okay? It can kind of grow back afterwards, like a eucalyptus tree, for example, okay, can do that. All right, in this picture here, we've got like a cheetah, and it's sitting on top of that mound. What kind of a mound is that? What makes mounds like that? Termites. Okay, that's a termite mound. It's basically a mound that's made out of termite poop, which is essentially sawdust. Okay, bugs are very plentiful because it's a tropical climate, but termites are especially plentiful, and they go after any plant-based material. So there's lots of grasses, there's lots of trees, there's lots of things like that for them to eat. Okay, so they have lots and lots of food sources. Okay, so lots of the trees in the savanna have to be fire resistant. Okay, with the action of fire and the voracious appetite of termites, okay, seeds rarely survive. So any plant that needs to reproduce in the savanna has to produce an unthinkable number of seeds, just in the hopes that some of them won't get eaten. Okay, so in response, trees produce enormous numbers of seeds. Many savanna trees are xerophytes. That means they're drought tolerant. Okay, they have a lot of resistance to water loss. Okay, they have really deep or spread out roots that enable them to take up water. Okay, they have deep roots and flattened crowns. So if we go back to this first picture here, okay, you can see that all the trees are kind of shaped like an umbrella. Okay, same with these ones here. They all have a kind of a relative umbrella shape to them. Okay, and that's what does that enable them to do? It creates shade, exactly. And I mean, on a hot day, sometimes you open an umbrella just to get some shade. It shades their roots, which means the sun can't shine directly on the ground where their roots are, and it keeps the water in there, keeps moisture in around their roots for a little bit longer. Okay. It also, if they have no leaves near the ground, then no animals can eat them, except giraffes. Okay, giraffes have evolved, obviously have a longer neck to reach the bottom of these kinds of plants, but at least it keeps the vast majority of the animals from being able to eat their lower leaves. Right, so that's one of the advantages that they have, or adaptations that they have. Now, another strange plant that grows in the savanna is called elephant grass. This is a picture of elephant grass. I actually had a student a number of years ago who was from South Africa, and when I was teaching this lesson, I was talking about elephant grass, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you guys, you wouldn't believe this stuff. We have this cabin out in the well, I can't remember what he called it. He didn't call it savanna, but out in the wild. Okay, he said, and when we go out there in the summertime, like you can't see it. You could drive up on the road and you can't see the house because the grass is taller than the house. Like, it's no word of a lie. This stuff can grow to be tall enough to have a herd of elephants walk through it and not be seen. Hence the name elephant grass. Okay, it grows that tall. Okay, it can actually grow taller than some of the trees. So he sent me this picture. He said, "See, that you can't see our house, and look how tall the grass is. It's almost as tall as the trees. Okay? Like, it's just crazy, okay? That this grass can grow. It's almost like bamboo, but not quite as thick as bamboo. Okay, so it's really, really strong, tall grass. But it also means that's a lot of food energy for herbivores, which is why there are so many herbivorous animals in the savanna. You got like your wildebeests and water buffalo and all these things. You got elephants, you got giraffes. They're all big herbivores. Okay, in the tropical rainforest, all the animals were very small. Okay, but in the savanna, there's wide open spaces. There's tons of food, so the animals are much, much bigger. Okay. All right. So soils, okay, soils in the savanna are typical of most grassland soils. They're thick, okay, and that's because every year grass dies and the old new grass grows up from below. Okay, so there's always this layer of thatch that builds up every year and creates a really thick organic layer, okay, on in the A horizon for plants to grow with. They are typically a bit sandier. Okay, so right now in this soil profile, okay, can you see the layers? Can you see A, B, and C? This is all A horizon. Okay? The A horizon here is 3 feet deep. Okay, that's 3 feet of topsoil. Okay? You kind of just start. There's a transition kind of right here towards the B horizon, and that's about it. Okay, so it's huge, really, really thick stuff. Okay, so the fauna, okay, animal diversity is low. In the tropical rainforest, animal diversity was pretty high because there were so many bugs, okay, and lots of small organisms. But in the savanna, animal diversity is low, and food chains are really, really short. Most of the time, your top predator preys directly on the herbivores. Okay, there isn't like a herbivore and then like a primary consumer and then a secondary consumer and then so on and so on. In the rainforest, food chains can be 12, 13, 15 organisms long. But in the savanna, they're incredibly short, and that's because the herbivores are so big. Okay? You can't really have a predator that eats them and then a bigger predator that eats that predator. Okay? It's just not practical. So the food chains in the savanna are pretty short. Okay? All right, and we talked about the termite mounds. Okay, obviously termites are another herbivore. Okay, they would support mostly like the bird population and things like that as their predators. Okay, and chemical cycling. So when something dies and it is decomposed, decomposition is fairly fast. Not as fast as it is in the tropical rainforest because of the long dry season. That long dry season can kind of limit the amount of decay that goes on because it gets so hot and dry. Right, and you can again see here with these trees, okay, they have that flattened bottom, okay, and an umbrella shape to them, okay. Same with these ones here in the back. This is a picture of what the savanna looks like right after the monsoon season. Okay, so after the monsoon season, there is definitely flooding, okay, in the area, but then it's not going to rain again for months, so it's going to dry up. Okay. All right, the desert. There's different kinds of desert. We do kind of lump them together, but there are different kinds of desert. There's obviously hot deserts, but there are also cold deserts, okay, or what we call mid-latitude deserts. Arizona, Nevada, okay, places like that, the Gobi Desert, those would be mid-latitude deserts. They have seasons. Okay, they do have a summer and a winter. Yes, summer's really hot, winter's not that bad, but there's still definite change between summer and winter. Okay, the Sahara is a tropical desert. It's hot all the time. Okay, hot and dry. What all deserts have in common, they're dry. Okay, so just know you could have climatograms that look different depending on what kind of desert it is, but they will all have in common that their precipitation lines or bars will be very low. Yeah. Okay, so obviously not all deserts are like the Sahara, okay, like what you would see in like Tunisia, you know, where they film all the scenes for Tatooine, you know, in all the Star Wars movies. Okay, it's not all rolling dunes and stuff like that. Sometimes it's like this, it's a rocky desert, okay? So they don't all look the same, but they obviously all have that they're dry in common. Okay, so in any case, for a desert, evaporation and transpiration are greater than precipitation, which means there's always less water. Okay? There's always more water being evaporated than actually falls, and that creates a really dry condition very, very deep down into the soil. And so this would be a hot desert climatogram. Okay, you can see the temperature doesn't change very much. It goes between 24 and 32. Okay, there's very little. There's lots of months where there's no precipitation at all. The wettest month, okay, we're looking at it's about 60 millimeters of rain. So that's that much. That's the wettest month. Okay, by far the wettest month, and lots of months where nothing at all happens. Okay, they can be rain shadow deserts. The Mojave is a rain shadow desert. Okay, and obviously the Gobi Desert is also one. Okay, the biggest thing, guys, always dry. Now, this is a hot desert, like we said, but there could be mid-latitude deserts, which would have similar precipitation, but they would have the bell curve temperature line, okay, where they would, drop down in temperature very low during the winters and drop and get very high during the summer months. So either one of those shapes could tell you it's a desert. Okay, so for the vegetation, okay, obviously it's not very dense. Okay, it's not everywhere. There's going to be big patches of bare soil because there's going to be a lot of competition between the plants that do grow there. They have to compete for water. Okay, not for light. Light's not an issue, but water is the limiting factor in the desert. So you're going to see, there'll be a clump of plants, and then there'll be nothing, and then there'll be another kind of clump of plants, and then nothing. Okay, but the plants obviously all do have to be able to estivate or just survive without getting water for very long periods of time. Okay, the saguaro cactus is a prime example of that. Okay, saguaro cacti can get to be very big and very, very old. Okay. A saguaro cactus does not grow its first arm until it's between 80 and 100 years old. Okay, so if you see a saguaro cactus that's got lots of arms, it could be several hundred years old. Okay, they do live a very, very long time. Now, saguaro cactus, deep roots or shallow roots? Actually, a saguaro cactus has incredibly shallow roots, but they can spread out up to 50 meters away from the plant itself. Okay, the reason being, unless you have roots that can go deep enough to reach an aquifer, okay, like an underground source of water, having deep roots in the desert doesn't do you much good. It never rains, so there's no moisture in the soil basically anywhere. So most desert plants will actually have very shallow roots so that when precipitation does fall, they can absorb it right away before it evaporates. right? It's not going to get a chance to penetrate deep into the soil. Everyone kind of follow me there? Yeah? Okay. Okay, for the soils, there's virtually no topsoil in the desert because there's no moisture, there's no plant, or not very many plants to hold it in place. So when it gets dry and windy, it just blows away. Okay? Any organic material, so when a plant dies, it's not going to decompose and build up an organic layer. It's just going to desiccate and blow away. Okay? So there's just not a lot of opportunity to get good looking topsoil. Okay? In Arizona, when they make a golf course or something like that, they actually truck in topsoil from other places because they just don't have it there. Okay. All right, salinity is also a big problem. Lots of the soils are very high in salts. Okay, you've probably seen, when a slough dries up or a lake dries up, it leaves that salt flat. Okay, like it's all white where it was before. Okay, there's a lot of that in the desert. Plants have a very hard time growing in that. Okay, because it upsets that osmotic balance that's necessary for them to move water. Okay, animals that live in the desert. Animals that live in the desert have to have a lot of adaptations to living without water or living with very little water. One of the smartest adaptations is to be nocturnal. Only come out at night when it's cooler. Okay. Other adaptations would be small. Okay, have scales or a carapace like an insect. Okay, scales like a reptile or things like that. If you're a mammal, you need to be small. Okay. Is sweating a good way to cool yourself if you live in the desert? No. If you sweat in the desert, you're going to die. Okay, it's just simple as that. That's not an efficient way. I mean, it's an efficient way to cool yourself, but you're going to dehydrate really quickly. So animals in the desert have to find other ways to cool themselves off. If they're mammals, okay, panting is better than sweating, but it still uses a fair amount of water. Okay, what you see there in that picture of the rabbit, you see the blood vessels in its ear. Okay, it can actually use that to help cool itself. When it gets hot, just like we do, we get flushed. Okay, and so blood goes towards the surface. So when the blood gets into the surface, in the little capillaries that are near the surface of the ear, the rabbit can just flap its ears a little bit, and it creates kind of a cooling of the blood in the ear, okay, allowing its body temperature to go down a little bit so that it's not suffering and not having to sweat or pant or do other things that would require it to lose water. Okay, so lots of different adaptations there. Okay, food chains. You're not going to have, again, a lot of big animals, but you're going to have lots of smaller ones. So most of your predators have to prey on rodents or insects. Okay, as their prey, and your insects have to be able to eat the few plants that actually grow there. Okay, in the desert, chemical cycling is basically absent. Okay, when something dies in the desert, there's not really a lot of decomposition that goes on. It just desiccates and then it blows away. Okay, bacteria and fungus require water, and there's just not enough of it there. Okay, so you don't see a lot of decomposition in the desert. All right, temperate grasslands. So temperate grasslands are also known as prairie. Now, if you look at this picture here, does this look like prairie? Right? Like it looks like I took a picture of the desert and put it on the wrong slide. Okay, like there's prickly pear cactus here, and there's all this dead thatchy grass, and there's bare rock and bits of soil here. Guys, the prairie can be very close to a desert in lots of places. This picture is taken just north of Medicine Hat. Okay, that's definitely prairie. It's not desert. Okay, but it's dry. Okay, there's different kinds of prairie. Right? There can be long grass prairie, which you would see if you were, let's say, like north of Red Deer. Okay? That would be long grass prairie, kind of into the parkland kind of stuff. And then there's short grass prairie, which is what you see down by Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, and those kind of places. Okay? It's much drier there. The summers are hotter. Okay? So the different kinds of grasses will grow. All right, so these are referred to as prairies in North America, steppe in Asia, only about 7% of the Earth's total land surface, but are the most important agricultural zones. Okay, this is where the bulk of the world's food is produced. Okay, so it's a super important biome for that, but that also means that it's a highly disturbed biome. Obviously, agriculture and crops is not the natural state of this biome. All right, so for climate, okay, here's Calgary's climatogram. Okay, basically all prairie looks like this. You're going to have the temperature line showing the seasons, and you're going to have the precipitation line generally following that curve. Okay, the precipitation in the prairies generally follows with temperature. So our wettest month is usually June. Second wettest month is usually July. Then it'll start to fall off again after that. Okay, May obviously can also have some precipitation, but that whole April showers bring May flowers thing doesn't work here. Okay, that's not. April is not a super wet month for us. In fact, lots of times in April we get, yeah, well, we get it in May too. We get it basically any month of the year. Okay, I mean, I've seen snow in July. Seen snow in August. So yeah, it happens, right? But in general, okay, our precipitation does generally follow temperature, with June usually being significantly wetter than any other month. All right, I mean, if you recall back in 2013 when we had all the big floods, okay, like that month of June was the wettest June ever. Okay, it was absolutely crazy. Okay, how much precipitation we got, and that's because a lot of our precipitation comes from thunderstorms. And that was the case then too. But we need energy in order to build thunderstorms. And obviously during June is when we get the most solar radiation, because the longest month or longest day of the year is June 21st. So that's where all the energy is available as well to get that cycle going. Okay, so this is short grass prairie. This is taken north of Medicine Hat, okay, in August. So it's already burnt. Okay, it's already pretty much gone dormant because there hasn't been rain for a month. Okay, but you can see the grasses are not very tall. There's a little like, you know, sagebrush and stuff that's obviously taller than the grass. All right, so for vegetation, there's Canadian shortgrass prairie. That's going to be dominated by speargrass and grama grass. Okay, mixed grass prairie is going to have wheatgrass, like red fescue, crested wheatgrass, prairie oakgrass, things like that. That looks a lot different. Okay, these two pictures. So this is again north of Medicine Hat. This is up by St. Paul. Right, these are taken 2 days apart. Right. Long grass prairie looks, or mixed grass prairie or long grass prairie looks a lot different than short grass prairie does, because there's different climate factors. It's not as hot, there's more rain further north, okay? So we get different kinds of grass growing. Okay. All right, the soils, again, because it's a grassland, big, thick A horizons. Right? Every year, the grass dies off, the thatch layer builds up, it decomposes, it builds up a big, thick, organic layer of topsoil. Okay, topsoil is important. If you're going to be farming, you need topsoil. It helps to retain moisture, it holds nutrients, things like that. So you have to be careful with it, which is why farmers typically do not till their fields very often anymore. Okay, it used to be, every fall they'd harvest the crop and then they would just plow the field, till it all up, and it'd be bare dirt. Okay, until spring. Problem with that is the wind would cause erosion and a lot of the topsoil would blow away. So now what farmers typically do is they harvest and then they leave the stubble. They leave the stubble behind. Okay? The stubble still has the roots, and the roots hold the soil in place. They will seed directly onto that stubble the next year. They won't plow it under. Okay? It's just new, kind of more modern farming techniques that help to preserve the soil. Okay. Animals. This slide is about animals. Why does that seem weird? Because there's no animals in it. And the reason for that is most of the naturally occurring fauna on the prairie is gone. Okay? It is a highly disturbed biome. What animal should be most readily present on the prairie? Buffalo. Yep. And they're pretty much gone. Okay? They were easy to hunt. They were inconvenient when it came to growing crops. A whole herd of 10,000 of them would come through and eat your crop. Okay, so we got rid of them. Okay, we started building fences and things like that. Not that a buffalo can't run through a fence, because man, they can. Okay, you have to build really big fences, but they're not very bright. Okay, if you put a fence up, a buffalo will go, oh, and they'll just turn around and go the other way. We actually starved out huge herds of buffalo because we fenced off areas where they would normally feed and took away their food sources. And they just didn't bother going through the fences. Okay? And again, they were easy to hunt. I mean, before Europeans came to North America, okay, the Aboriginal people here would do what? How would they hunt them? Run them off a cliff. Okay. See, the thing with buffalo is their eyes are on the sides, like most herbivores are. Okay. Why do herbivores have their eyes on the sides? Right, so they can eat but still see predators. Okay, predator organisms, their eyes are in the front because we're always looking for our prey. Okay, so with a buffalo, they have a blind spot, and it's right in front of them. So if you spook them, you can get them running, and they are looking to the sides. You are doing whatever over here, grabbing their attention, spooking them, getting them running, and they will run right off a cliff because they'll never see it coming. Okay, and so that's how they were hunted. Because I mean, before Europeans came here, there were no modern weapons. Okay, our native peoples had spears and things like that that they could use, and that's not really a good way to take down a buffalo. You're not really in a buffalo's weight class. Okay, if you're trying to hunt one with a spear, you're very brave. Okay, because they're just not gonna. That's not something you're gonna take one down with. But once we came and brought horses and guns with us, buffalo became pretty easy prey. Okay? They're a big target, and now that you have a horse, you can keep up with them. Okay? So we ran them pretty much to extinction after that. Okay? So buffalo are gone. Once you remove the largest herbivore from the biome, its predators go with it. Okay? There used to be black bear and grizzly bear on the prairie. Now you never see them. Okay? Almost never, but very, very rarely do you ever see a grizzly bear or a black bear on the prairie. They're pretty much only in the mountain parks now. Okay? Wolves. Wolves are gone too. Packs of wolves, don't see them on the prairie anymore. Okay, you'll still see coyotes. Why will you still see coyotes? They're scavengers. Yeah, they'll eat anything, and they'll eat and chase rodents and whatever else. Okay, in fact, they're dangerous if you have dogs. Okay, they'll like tease your dog until they come out far enough, and then the pack will come in and get them. Like they're a very opportunistic predator. So they've survived. Okay, because their food sources were not as affected as the larger predators.
They were outside my window last night. There's a pack of about 6 or 7 of them, and they chased down a rabbit and killed it in front of me.
In front of you, yeah. And they're savage, yeah. So, yeah, they are a savage predator, but they're what's left. And even their numbers are greatly reduced because, well, if you're a farmer and you got chickens or whatever, and they're trying, they get near them, you're shooting them. Okay, so, and I mean you have to, but they're certainly kind of what's left. Okay, other things like there's not as many deer, there's not as many antelope. Okay, because those animals all compete for the food sources that our livestock do. We've brought in animals to replace the wild ones. Okay. We don't have buffalo as livestock very many places because buffalo are harder to contain. Okay, they're bigger, they require more food. Okay, I mean they taste better, but I mean cattle are dumb. They're big and stupid, and so they're easier to keep around. Okay, and easier than deer or elk or things like that. You have to build an 8-foot fence to keep elk in. Okay, but with cattle, 3 pieces of barbed wire and you're good. They're not going anywhere. Okay, so we've replaced them. We've replaced the wild animals with domesticated animals that are easier. Yeah, but just not nearly as many. And they're mostly down in the southern part of Alberta because it's hotter and drier, which is what they like. Right? Like an antelope is so specialized that it doesn't require, it can go its whole life without actually drinking water. Okay, they'll eat cactus. Their tongue and the inside of their mouth is like shoe leather. It's just really tough. Okay, so they can just chomp right down on like a prickly pear cactus and eat it. Okay, and they won't get the needles stuck in their cheeks or anything like that. So they're highly specialized animals. I mean, yes, there's still deer. Yes, there's still elk, but not in the numbers there used to be. Okay, because again, we've got huge herds of cattle that are eating the same food source. All right, so that's the thing with the animals, the fauna in the temperate grasslands. It's, again, highly altered. Okay, it's just a highly altered biome. Okay, chemical cycling it's slower. Okay, it's not like a tropical biome, but it goes reasonably well for a mid-latitude or temperate biome, simply because the grass can cycle fairly quickly. Okay, there's at least reasonable amounts of moisture, and the winter. I mean, winter slows things down. Obviously, decomposition doesn't occur when everything is frozen. Right. Okay, temperate, deciduous, broadleaf, evergreen, sclerophyllous forest biomes. I'm basically lumping a few things together here, but these are the biomes that contain any trees that lose their leaves each year. All right, so because they're generally similar in structure. About 9% of the Earth's land surface, okay, and again, okay, lots of deciduous trees that will lose their leaves. Okay, this is also tends to be a fairly altered biome, simply because these tend to be in places that are highly populated. So we clear this biome a lot, okay, in order to produce room. We also clear it for lumber, okay, and things like that. Okay, so in these biomes, the difference between a deciduous forest biome and a temperate grassland biome is precipitation. Temperature is pretty much the same. You can still see the bell curve here on this climatogram, but what you do see is instead of having the precipitation follow the temperature, the precipitation is much more uniform. That's the defining characteristic. Okay, as a deciduous forest is going to have uniform or fairly uniform precipitation all year long, and it's fairly significant amounts too. Okay, wettest month is 70 millimeters, but the driest month is only like 45. So there's not a huge difference. Okay, it's very uniform. That's what keeps trees going. Trees can't survive in a place where they're going to have to, go 2 months with no moisture. Okay, things like that. So you definitely have more even, more regular precipitation in the deciduous forest biome. Okay. Now, a deciduous forest is similar to a tropical rainforest in the layering as well. A tropical rainforest has way more layers, but a deciduous forest can also have multiple layers: undergrowth, understory, and then canopy in there as well. All right, so temperate forests are typically dominated by oak, beech, hickory, smaller quantities of understory trees like birch, hazel, sycamore, and maple. Okay, obviously maple more in Canada. Okay, broadleaf evergreen forests are in more humid places, so that would be maybe like Georgia and places like that. So there would be oak and magnolias and even some palms occasionally. Okay, sclerophyllous forest biomes are in the Mediterranean climate, so they have different plants as well. They'll have things like olive, okay, sessile oak, and pine. Okay, so things that are more drought and heat tolerant. Okay, and they do have that stratification. So, okay, you can see that they grow branches everywhere. Okay, they have more of a significant canopy. Anything that grows on the ground has to be shade tolerant. Okay, soils, excuse me. The soils are going to have a fairly good A horizon because every year there's going to be a layer of leaf litter. Okay, leaf litter falls off the trees every year, and it's going to create this organic material and also kind of a layer that holds moisture in. Okay, water's not going to evaporate through a big layer of leaves that are on the ground nearly as easily as if the ground is directly exposed. So the soils are going to be more moist. Okay, and typically the sea horizon is a lot more broken. Okay, it's not like solid rock so much as it's broken rock, like Canadian Shield and things like that. Okay. All right, the animals, longer food chains, bigger animals. Okay, so we're going to have, moose and elk. Okay, yes, there's going to be some rodents and there's going to be some insects for sure. Okay, but you do have some food chains that are short because you have big animals, but you're going to have some that are longer if you're dealing with the smaller ones. Okay, if you're dealing with predators like lynx and fox and stuff like that. Okay. Okay, chemical cycling is fairly rapid, okay, for a temperate biome. It's not like a tropical biome, but because there's shade, moisture stays, okay? So that can really lead to the growth of fungi, right? So you'll see a lot more mushrooms and stuff like that underneath or on the ground in a deciduous forest than you would in obviously on the prairie or places like that. Okay, so decomposition will be more rapid than on the prairie in here because there's shade, because there's more moisture, there's more, the winters tend to be a bit more mild. Okay, so decomposition will be a bit more rapid. Okay, the taiga. All right, the taiga is probably the most common biome in Canada. All right, this is like, if you go to Banff, you go to Kananaskis, you go to Fort McMurray, okay, that's where the taiga is. Okay, it's all just spruce trees and only about 4 or 5 different kinds of spruce trees. So it's not very diverse, okay, but it is very rugged. It's relatively undisturbed, but becoming more and more disturbed as our technology improves. There's tons of resources, not just lumber. Okay, this is where the oil sands tend to be. Okay, and that's true in Asia as well. They have very similar structure to their taiga biome there, lots of resources available, so it's being more and more disturbed as we go on. Okay, but wildfires are a big problem. Obviously, we know that from a couple of years ago, okay, with the Fort McMurray fires. This stuff, this biome, it's cold most of the year. If there's not a lot of rain in the spring, it's going to be very dry. Okay, so if there's low snowfall, not a lot of rain in the spring, it dries out very quickly, and then when thunderstorms start, then we can get the wildfires going, and obviously that's what happened there a few years ago. And those wildfires burned from April into the fall. Okay, Like the only thing that really put those wildfires completely out was the first snowfall of the year. Okay, they burned basically the whole spring and summer of that year. Okay? So that can be a big problem, but the forest is kind of built around that. Okay? There's a process called succession, right? When a forest burns, the first plants that come back are different, and then plants replace them, and eventually the forest comes back after a few hundred years. Right now, most of our taiga is in the very mature to beyond mature phase. Okay? Most of our forests like this are very old. And so they're at the point where they're going to burn. There's a lot of deadfall, so there's a lot of fuel. Okay, all it takes is one spark, and this is just a natural process. Okay, it's a natural process of renewal, and it has to happen. Okay, yes, we worry about it because there's been so many forest fires over the last few years, but it's a natural occurrence. This is just the state we're in right now. Okay, there's going to be more forest fires now simply because the forests are at that point in their life. Okay. All right, climate, definite seasonality, okay? Wicked bell curve, but here's the thing. Look at where the bell curve sits. Here's temperature, okay? A prairie biome would have its bell curve probably sit like this, okay? The taigas drops down much, much lower. The whole curve is actually dropped down lower than what a prairie or other temperate biome would be. This is a cold biome. Okay, some of the coldest temperatures in the world are actually recorded here as opposed to in like the high Arctic. Okay, so it can be minus 45 to minus 50 for long periods in the winter, but in the summer it can be 25 to 30 degrees. So you have to have pretty well adapted plants to be able to survive fluctuations like that. Okay, winter can persist for well more than half of the year. Okay, and most of the annual precipitation falls in a 1.5 to 2 week period. Okay, so you can see here, yeah, precipitation is, it's fairly uniform, but there's definitely a wet season during August and September, and then it's dry again. Okay, does snow fall here? Certainly it does. But here's what you have to realize about snow. 10 centimeters of snow is the equivalent of 1 centimeter of rain. Okay, snow is fluffy. There's lots of air spaces in it. So when it falls, we get 10 centimeters of it. When it melts, it's only like 1 centimeter of rain. So yeah, there might be lots of snow here, but when it melts, it's not actually a lot of moisture. The other problem with snow melt is when the snow is melting, the ground under it is frozen. So it just runs off. It doesn't absorb into the soil. Okay, so there has to be rain in the late spring in order for these kind of things to thrive. Okay, vegetation, not diverse at all. Okay, so like if you're looking at this picture here, okay, there's maybe, there's some Engelmann spruce, and there's some lodgepole pine, and there's some black spruce, and that's about it. There's like 3 different kinds of trees. Okay, you go into a forest in Kananaskis or into Banff, and there's like 5 different kinds of spruce trees, and that's it. It's not very diverse at all. There's a few deciduous trees here and there. There's grasses and stuff that grow on the ground, okay? But really not a lot of diversity, certainly not like the tropical rainforest or anything like that. Okay, soils, the A horizons tend to be very, very thin because these biomes tend to be in colder areas where topsoil has not had the opportunity to build up. Okay, plus there's all that runoff that tends to take soil with it in the springtime. So they don't have a very thick topsoil, but okay, sometimes they have a thick B horizon, but most of the time the C horizon is very close to the surface. You've probably seen in Banff or Kananaskis, sometimes it looks like a tree is growing right out of the rock. Okay, and that's the case. They can do that. Okay, there's not a lot of thick topsoil in the taiga. Okay, animals have to be of 2 types. They're either going to, actually 3 types. They can be migratory, which means they only are in this biome for part of the year. They can be the kind that would hibernate, so they would be active only during the summer and then sleep through the winter, or they can be active all year, right? But they have to be highly adaptive if they're going to do that. Okay, snow is important for these animals because it's an insulator. Okay, if you're looking at the layers here, it can be minus 40 outside, but within the burrow of some of these animals, it can be above freezing. Has anyone ever built a quinzhee? Okay, like a quinzhee is like kind of a snow shelter or survival shelter. Basically, all you do is you just build a pile of snow and then you hollow it out. Okay, when I used to teach in Lloydminster, we had a whole unit on snow ecology, and every year on the coldest day, I would send the kids out well, I'd go with them. I wouldn't send them out. I'd go with them. And we go out onto the football field and we would build big quinzees. And we could get the temperature in those quinzees above zero. Like literally like drops of water would fall on us from the snow, okay? Because we could get it so hot inside, even though it was minus 40 outside. Okay? And you wouldn't believe how fast people will build a quinzee when it's minus 40 outside. Okay, like shovels, and they're just going like crazy. Okay, so snow is a good insulator. Okay, it's good for animals, but it's also good for the plants. If there's no snow cover and it drops really, really, really cold, it can kill the plants off. It can destroy them so that they can't grow back the next year. Okay, you might see that sometimes on your lawn. If there was an area where there wasn't a lot of snow, that part of the grass takes forever to come back. Okay, versus the places that were under the snow come back a lot more quickly. Okay, so snow is super important. Okay, some animals will hibernate. Okay, true hibernators are not, like bears are not true hibernators. Bears get like lazy and sleepy, but their metabolism doesn't change. True hibernators, metabolism will change during the winter. So gophers and squirrels, when they hibernate, their body temperature drops, their heart rate drops, their respiration drops. If you were to pick up a hibernating squirrel or a gopher, you would probably think it was dead because it would be cold and stiff. Okay, its heart will beat a couple of times a minute. It'll breathe once a minute. Okay, and it'll feel cold to the touch. Okay, their temperature, body temperature drops like 10 degrees down to like 10 degrees. Okay, they feel dead, but they do that because then they don't burn a lot of fuel. Now, throughout the winter, they wake up and they shiver like crazy and get their body temperature up, and then they eat some of the seeds that they've stored, and then they go back into hibernation again. Okay? Whereas something like a bear may not eat all winter. Okay, they gorge through like August, September, October on berries and fish and whatever. Okay, and they build up lots of fat, and then they live off the fat. Okay, throughout the winter. Okay, other examples: wolverines. Okay, a wolverine is like a grizzly bear concentrated into an animal the size of a German Shepherd. Okay, yeah, they're very angry. You don't want to mess with them. There's a reason the superhero is named after them. Okay, yeah, they're wicked. Okay, and they're good hunters, but you don't want to get on their bad side because they can be quite vicious. But they are an animal that would be a little more active throughout the year. Okay, obviously like Arctic hare and Arctic fox also active all year long, and their coats change color. Okay, another adaptation that animals in the taiga and in the tundra may have. They may have different coats in the summer and winter. Okay, and we even see that in like the deer, and if you look at like the mountain sheep. Okay, all of them, they have a winter coat that they shed in the spring. They all look sick and patchy in the spring. Okay, all of those are things that you have to do if you're going to live in a biome where the temperature fluctuates a lot. Okay, chemical cycling, slow. It's winter most of the time. It's frozen. Okay, tree falls in the forest, it sits there forever. Okay, it takes decades for a tree to decompose here because moisture, I mean, it's not that there isn't moisture, but most of the year it's frozen. So it's essentially dry. Okay, and that's hard for fungus and bacteria and stuff to get going on. Okay, and there's not as many bugs, so there's not as many things that are decomposing the trees and stuff when they fall. We do have ants, like woodcutter ants. Okay, how many people have ever come across woodcutter ants before? Okay, and they do help to decompose things more quickly. Okay, woodcutter ants are horrible. You don't want to accidentally find a nest of those. Okay, like I did that once. I used to work at a golf course, and we had to go cut down all these dead trees. So I had the chainsaw, and I'm going through this tree, and there was a nest right in the middle of the tree, and I hit it with the chainsaw. Where does the chainsaw spit everything? Yeah, straight back. So it hit this nest, which was just full of carpenter ants, and it got right onto my legs. I just got covered in bites. Like, it was awful. Okay, and then of course the tree fell down and went, poof, and then they were everywhere. Yeah, gives me the willies just thinking about it. I got so bit that day. But yeah, but they do like they make the tree essentially rot from the inside because they just eat it. Okay, to make their tunnels and stuff. Okay, the tundra. Am I going to get through this? I might. Okay, so the tundra, okay, is an Arctic grassland. It's so cold that trees don't grow. The soil is frozen most of the year, okay? And when it does thaw, it only thaws like the top layer or so, okay? Daylight in winter is non-existent. Daylight in summer is total, okay? That's strange. It takes certain kinds of organisms to be able to tolerate that, okay? Mountain tundra, so the tops of mountains above the tree line. Okay, so if you've ever been above the tree line in the mountains, you're in the mountain tundra. Okay, it's still the same thing. It's a grassland. Okay, it's cold, and that's why there's no trees up there. The line where trees stop is determined by temperature, not altitude. All right, so as you go further north, the tree line gets lower and lower and lower. Okay, so it's not by altitude, it's by temperature. Okay, and so you can see here, okay, all we see is like, you know, short grasses and some patchy plants and stuff. Guys, the date on this picture is July 6th. What's this? Snow. Okay, snow can persist all year long. Okay, it's just always going to be there. Okay, so climate. Yes, we've got a very low curve. Okay, we definitely have a curve, but it's very, very low. Okay, warmest temperatures in the tundra, okay, between 5 and 10 degrees on average. Coldest temperatures, way down in the minuses. Okay, precipitation, and although these bars are really long, they aren't actually that high. This is 60 millimeters. Okay, that's 6 centimeters of rain in the wettest month. And most of that is coming as snow. Okay, even though, okay, we're looking at like August, July and August, okay, this can still fall as snow in July and August, right? There's just going to be more of it, or it'll melt quickly, okay, things like that. So definitely going to see lots of snow, okay? Similar thing here, this is July 8th, still lots of snow present in that biome. Okay, vegetation, tundra means treeless. That's what the term means. Okay, and so it's above the timberline in the mountains. Okay, a few hardy species of low-growing sedges, grasses. Grasses, I don't know why I have that in there twice. Dwarf shrubs, lichens, mosses. Okay, things like that. Snow cover is important because it insulates them from the cold temperatures during the winter. Okay, but it can persist throughout the year. Done. Got it all done. Okay, so on Monday we will be going over the unit exam review. Then Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll do final exam review. Thursday's your unit exam. Friday, we'll go over the unit exam, and I'll answer any final questions that you might have. Okay, remember guys that your final exam is going to be in Mr. Baldwin's classroom, St. Maximilian, far left of this wing. Okay,